Hi, everyone. I'm Marty Gold, and I'm here with a commentary about the 2023 Manitoba provincial election. As we get ready for, how do they call it in horse racing again? The call to the post and the bugle sounds. So we see that the various horses, being the political parties, positioning themselves for the race as they enter the starting gate. And it's become very apparent that there were some weaknesses in the approach of the NDP and an awful lot of caution in the approach of the Progressive Conservatives. I set the Liberal Party under Doug Lamont, I set them aside for a second because there's no realistic opportunity for the Liberal Party to, capture anywhere close to the number of seats where they would have become official opposition or hold the seat of government. So I set that aside. I'll look largely at the positioning of the two main political parties. Certainly the orgy of spending, as some have put it, by the Conservatives took the steam out of any potential campaign for the New Democrats by throwing scads and scads of money at, in particular, healthcare and signing the contract with doctors, etc. So this has kind of taken the stick out of the hands of the NDP. In addition, the relatively rapid settlement of the Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries Commission employees, that also takes away a stick that the opposition has been hoping to beat the government with on the campaign trail. The fact that a settlement was reached in relatively short order means that this, as a hot public issue, is going to die pretty much, in my estimation, is going to die right off. So it's one less weapon the NDP has. Now, keep in mind, the Conservatives go into this election with a sufficient majority that they're really looking at a situation of, how do I put this? Making sure that the losses aren't excessive. Making sure that if they lose seats, that it's within the margin of error, so to speak. Devin Ross, the Free Press, a guy that I greatly respect, and he's really, for a lot of people, the voice of liberalism, if not the Liberal Party in Manitoba. And he's been writing op-eds for the Free Press for some time. He's also, as a matter of clarification, he's also worked in the past for the Conservative government. I know he worked under Premier Pallister. I don't know whether that continued under Premier Stephenson or not. I just don't recall offhand. But just to be clear about where Devin Ross comes from, one thing I can say about Devin Ross is he's in favor of good governance. He compiled a list in a recent column looking at this idea of how many seats are at risk for the Conservatives, which ones are battleground, so to speak, that the NDP in particular are trying to capture. That's about 13 seats, he estimates, a baker's dozen, that are going to be where the battle is won or lost, with one Liberal seat viewed as being potentially at risk. And I believe he was talking about Doug Lamont's seat in St. Boniface and not Cindy Lamer's seat in Tyndall or Dr. John Gerard's seat in River Heights. Out of those 13 seats, the one Liberal seat, this is where the NDP has to try to find some gains, where Wab Kinew has to be able to convince enough voters to switch from other parties, unless you have like a ridiculously suppressed turnout, which I don't think anybody's talked about. As Ross put it, such a shift of votes from other parties to the NDP would require a massive ideological leap by thousands of voters. That reality defines the NDP goal in the re-election campaign, and that is to hold on to the voters who voted for Brian Pallister in 2016 and 2019 without mentioning Pallister's name, because he automatically the mention of his name automatically turns people off. So it's a bit of a balancing act. Now, to vote for a party that puts forward these initiatives, let alone the rank and file members and young socialists in particular. When you look at online forums, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with Kinew. There's certain, and I want to be clear, there's certainly dissatisfaction with Heather Stephenson. Of that, there is no doubt. But people seem to be united in she's what they've got to work with. With Kinew, people are openly talking about how next election, when Henny Fontaine is the leader of the NDP, don't make me laugh with what kind of, that's probably the biggest anchor. There are two big anchors around Wab Kinew. His caucus, people like Henny Fontaine, these far left radicals that themselves engage in all sorts of racist statements and hate-filled diatribes. And the other problem, of course, is Kinew's own background and history, which he's attempted to deal with head on, and has not been successful. Imagine what's going to happen during the campaign when the name of his former partner, Tara Hart, keeps getting trotted out, and what he said about how her complaint wasn't trustworthy. You know, one thing the media never mentions when the subject of Wab Kinew once had domestic violence charges, they never mentioned they were not only stayed, actually they do mention they were stayed some of the time, but what isn't mentioned is they were stayed without the knowledge of the complainant, and I think she could almost certainly be described as a victim in that instance. And another thing, just to mention, what happens if the couple that was visiting with Kinew and his girlfriend that fateful night, I believe it was on Hargrave, before his girlfriend of the day almost got an up close and personal meeting with the balcony rail. What happens if that couple is identified and is interviewed and what they saw and heard that night comes to the fore? So a lot of pitfalls in that regard still to come, potentially to come, that handicap Kinew's run. So faced with that, he's tried to overcome this by becoming a bit, it appears to me, a bit of an everyman. Now, the Tories, I have not heard, certainly I've heard conservatives complain that this spending is out of character, but none of the spending is described as wasteful. The spending, whether it's directed to education, whether it's directed to healthcare, I don't really hear. Anyways, and if you know somebody who is complaining, feel free to have them contact me. Generally, conservatives are on board with what the money's been spent on. They may not be crazy about the amounts. I haven't heard anybody from among the Conservative Party say, oh my God, the Stephenson government or the team Stephenson is proposing to spend millions of dollars on this or that. I'm not going to vote for them. You don't really hear that. When Kinew says he's going to spend money on something, there's two kinds of reactions. Either people don't believe that it's sincere in terms of spending money for any reason other than to gain election, other than to gain votes, or the alternative is nobody believes that he can be trusted, the Kinew and the NDP can be trusted handling the money, hearkening back to the prior administration. That's one thing that favors the Conservatives, is that people are looking with regards to matters of economic stability, matters of housing, etc. As much as they like bad-mouthing Stephenson and Pallister, they can't necessarily be bad-mouthed successfully on a lot of these popular topics. The NDP, in my estimation, needed to try to keep the heat on healthcare, but there was not only no traction, but as Devon Ross, going back to his column, says, it looks like the NDP basically took July off, and that there was no real presence of them, no pushback of them on a lot of the Tory announcements, and that may have contributed to the NDP trailing in the most recent poll, 42 to 38, with, I'm sure, some sort of dead heat in the city of Winnipeg. As he put it, they had no push. Most days they had no pushback at all. They should have making healthcare the only election issue on Manitobans' minds. That isn't the case right now. The idea that the NDP is going to make education a topic, I'll deal with in another podcast sometime soon. But that has all the potential to backfire on the NDP, because this concept of parental rights, every time somebody says it's a dog whistle for the right wing, it actually loses credibility with voters who very much believe in the principle that A, parents deserve to know what's going on in schools, and B, that the current system, they can go talk with their school trustees. Well, not when your school trustees are banning people they don't like from school board meetings, not when you can't get proper answers to questions. And I've heard from parents directly, grandparents directly, about things that are going on in schools, the Tory campaign wanting to provide some accountability, and anybody who stands against this, amazing how often you hear people say, this is imported from the U.S., but you never hear how many times policies of the NDP or the Liberals are actually also imported from the realm of U.S. politics. So the NDP, being in a front-runner position going into this pre-election period, now appearing to be scrambling from behind, coming up with all sorts of policies that commit to massive amounts of spending. And if you don't think that there's going to be a hike in the PST, provincial sales tax, then Wab Kinew probably has a Salter Street Bridge to sell you or something of that nature. I'll continue to keep an eye and an ear on what is happening, what is being said, the announcements that are going on, and I'll be back with more information, analysis, news, and opinion here on the 2023 Manitoba provincial election for WinnipegTribune.ca.